Welcome back to MONEV Podcast by MONEV Studio. For those who are new, you might be wondering what the MONEV Podcast is. Well, the MONEV Podcast is a discussion and learning channel about monitoring and evaluations, or MONEV, in a casual chat, covering up-to-date material on the concepts and practice of MONEV in development. By the way, my name is Inatul Fitri, a Program and Operations Officer here at MONEV Studio. Today, I will be hosting this episode, so feel free to reach us through info@monevstudio.org. In this episode, we will be talking about logical framework analysis. We are joined here by Miss Ari Ratna Agustin, our associate specializing in conflict DRR indigenous people here at MONEV Studio. All right, so let's say hello to Ibu Ari Ratna Agustin. Hello, Ibu. How are you doing?
Hi, Inaya. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Great, Ibu. Great. So, before jumping in the main session, let me introduce you to our speaker. She is an expert with 15 years of experience in civil society, policy analysis, disaster risk, and poverty alleviation. She holds a master's degree from the Asian Institute of Technology, or AIT, in Thailand and the University of the West of England in Bristol, United Kingdom. Ms. Ari is an expert in monitoring and evaluation, specializing in qualitative and quantitative data research, participatory research, project or program management, and capacity building. Last but not least, Ms. Ari has experience collaborating with several organizations such as Hong Kong's REACH Evaluations, North Somerset Council from the United Kingdom, Eco Mobile Ltd, USA, UNDP, American Red Cross, Mahkota, Development Alternatives Incorporated or DAI, WFP, TNP2K, Palladium Group, Rimes from Thailand, and Care International Indonesia. So, in this episode, we will have 3 segments. Let's jump into the first segment. So, Ibu Ari, let's start from the foundation. What do you see as the foundation of the logical framework as a representation of social change?
Thank you for the kind introduction and question, Inaya. I will say the logical framework aims to depict in a linear, simple, and systematic way a causal model of social change resulting from a program intervention. It is a model of change, not the change itself. So if you see, the format of a log frame is quite similar, starting with input at the bottom and then moving up to activity, output, outcome, and impact at the top. They're all in one column, and at the next column, respectively, are indicators, means of verification, and risk and assumptions. So log frames assume that program-related change can be influenced and predictable, not accidental. This is where the program interventions work. Planned intervention can improve behavior, institution, or outcomes. In this sense, the log frame is rooted in a programmatic worldview. Change can happen because a program does something differently, not simply because conditions evolve on their own. Second, log frame assumes that program-related change can be presented as a causal change. For example, if we do X, then Y will happen. Of course, certain assumptions and potential risk apply. Third, observed, described, and measured, at least during the program period. So log frame expected that a change can be observed, described, and measured. Should we retake for this?
I think it's okay, Bu. Nanti saya bisa edit yang backgroundnya.
Oke, maaf ya. Okay, so I'll change. I will re-explain for the third. Yeah. So log frame expect that change can be observed, described, and measured, at least during the program period. Um, this doesn't mean that all change is fully measurable, but at least it's open to scrutiny. And the last, there are possibilities to agree upon meanings, definition or limitations among stakeholders. What I mean is definition and limitation of the term used and the program itself. Yeah, like what the program cover, what the program do not cover, and they've got. I mean, among stakeholders have shared language of results, like what 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 are resilience? What does it mean with improved livelihood? To some extent, they are right and work, but not in some circumstances. So this log frame, they can struggle with non-linear or complex changes. Yeah, over to you, Inaya.
All right. Thank you so much, Hibuari, for such a complex explanations on the foundations on logical framework. So we're moving on to the second questions. When does a logical framework clarify causality, and when does it merely impose artificial order on complex realities?
Um, well, it's a good question. A log frame clarifies causality by making causal thinking explicit, by showing a clear, if-then vertical link between activities, outputs, outcomes, and goals, and where it also include key assumptions that explain how external factors like political, economic, environmental can affect the results of the program. Well, log frame is best used to design a program, monitor progress, and during implementation, we need to adjust and improve the logic. More specifically, a log frame clarify causality when first the theory of change, the theory of change should be developed prior to the log frame development, and this theory of change, it should be reasonable and evidence based. What I mean with evidence-based is it is based on analysis of the context of the social, economy, and political background where the program work. Yeah, and it based on an in-depth series of discussion. And uh, this means that the links between activities, output outcomes reflects how change happens in particular context. What I mean with particular context is it there is no like general log frame for example for climate change project. There is no such a log frame. We should modify it specifically for different setting, different contexts. In Indonesia or even Indonesia, it should be different between Java and Sumatra or Papua, for example. And and assumptions are a real condition that must hold for each causal step. So we cannot make like one assumptions for one outcome, but for we should one outcome in whole. If the assumption, if the outcomes, one outcome consists of several outputs, we should mention uh, assumption in every output. And then the next is when the intervention is relatively bound and coherent. This means that the program has a clear problem and identifiable actors who do what and when, and a manageable number of pathways. There is a dominant causal road rather than many competing ones. For example, coastal community resiliency with defined levers. I mean, so like if you, for example, if you want to achieve coastal community resiliency, how many outputs to reach there. So it's not just one activity that lead to one outcome, but it should be several layers. And the third is assumptions are used as analytical checkpoints. Causality becomes clearer when assumptions are specific, contextual, and revisited. What I mean with contextual is it's based on actual and relevant political will, social norms, and cultural setting. Like I mentioned before, it should be based on evidence as well, and should be discussed thoroughly with stakeholders. This is important, yeah. You don't just write and forget it until the program closure. You need to revisit it and recheck whether it's still relevant, and refine it again if it is not relevant, and then what should the project do. And risk should be treated seriously as causal condition. And evaluation examine where the bottleneck, so the program can take necessary action if bottleneck happen. And the last thing is when the log frame is treated as a living document. So we need to review it regularly and adjust as necessary. It's same like the assumption. So actually, the general log frame should be review and adjust regularly at least once in a year, yearly, or you can do it like during the midterm evaluation. And this should be considered, especially when the context changes. And we use it to explain, yeah, not hide deviations between plan implementation and results. So if you review it regularly, you will easy to identify why some changes happen expected, why some don't, like that, and you can explore it. You can elaborate the reason why, and then make some adjustment on your activity. And what I mean with that log frame, it should be treated as a living document, that it should has smart indicators that take into account change in behavior, systems, or capacity, not just counts, not just number. Okay, can you please repeat for your what question after that?
Yeah. So the question was, when does a logical framework clarify causality, and when does it merely impose artificial order on complex realities?
Okay, so I suppose I have explained the first, yeah, when does logical framework clarify causality. So I will go to the second question, yeah, when does it merely impose artificial? Okay, so I would say a log frame imposes artificial order by confusing structure with understanding. This happens when the log frame simplifies the complexity. When it forces complex change into a linear if-then change. So this happened, but the log frame presents ultimate actor, adaptive or policy influences as neat vertical progression. It misrepresents how change happens. So in the log frame, yeah, in such log frame where it imposes artificial order, yeah, feedback loops, nonlinear effects, and power dynamic disappeared or are not sufficiently explained. And the second is causality is assumed rather than discussed. So, the project just make assumption. It's not just make assumption if we do X, the result will be Y or Z, something like that. It's not discussed thoroughly, and it's not based on evidence. It doesn't have a, a legit reference. And this means that the log frame treats outputs automatically as sufficient causes of outcomes. For example, like um, suppose if we have capacity building, it automatically translated as behavior change. In fact, it doesn't mean like that, right? If you do capacity building, it means that you just train some people. It doesn't mean that their behavior will change. You will not need some other activities to influence their behavior change. And risks and assumptions are generic. It is written as like for example as a limited resources without any details or level of risk. Like what kind of risk is like high risk or medium or just regular low risk like that. And the third is the primary purpose of the log frame is just compliance, not for learning. The log frame is designed to satisfy donor templates, not for decision making. Or worse, yeah, it's merely copied from other similar program elsewhere without any adaptation or modification. You might see there some terminology is not relevant to the context, and it uses simplified or shallow indicators for ease of reporting. And the last is the log frame treats uncertainty as static. It assumes a predictable environment despite high uncertainty, shocks, or rapid policy shifts. So you, it's like too good to be true. It's perfect. Everything will be achieved as planned within several years, 5 years, for instance. And this log frame might see adaptation as a deviation rather than a necessary response to reality. Yeah, over to you, Inaya.
All right. Thank you, Ibu, for such an interesting answer, actually. And now let's move on into the second segment about practice and professional judgment. So now, Bu Ari, how have you seen the field realities consistently challenge the linear logic embedded in logical frameworks?
Yeah, I think there are some ways realities challenge the linear logic. Uh, you know, it's your social change rarely follows the linear activity output outcome sequence assumed in log frames, and context shifts faster than plans. In some cases, I even found that context changed several times during program planning when the log frame was still in development. It's interesting, isn't it? And this affect, yeah, outcomes which often emerge through political dialogues, informal actors, or external shocks like budget cuts, leadership or political changes rather than planned steps. And they may also cause little or no change at all despite the efforts made, and this disrupts the neat sequence of the log frame activity output and outcome. And it challenged the linear logic in log frame because causality, in fact, yeah, this causality is shared across multiple actors. Uh, Programs rarely the sole or even main driver of change. Uh, Multi-stakeholders and social and economic and political event they interact, and it is challenging for the log frame to capture the overlapping causal influences that act simultaneously. And you might see that even for one outcome, it owned by several organizations. Yeah, you can see this in donor agencies, for example, like one big outcome that related to SDGs. It is owned by several organizations, so it's not dominated by one. The success, the achievement, yeah, the result is not uh, dominated by one actor. And log frames often imply, linear one-directional change. For example, trainings conducted are expected to improve knowledge, improve behavior, and in the end, sustained outcomes. In practice, behavior change require refresher training, reinforcement through certain policies, trust, and a sense of the need to change. Yeah, in the WAS program, for instance, yeah, we cannot just train people to put their rubbish in the bin and not throwing it into the river. Most of the time, the government needs a policy to find people who throw the trash into the river. And even so, even after the policy is issued and what's approved by the government, yeah, this policy still needs some socialization, so people will understand, and then in the end they change their behavior, yeah, not throwing the rubbish into the river. And results can be reversed even all after your result that's already achieved. It can be reversed due to turnover, change of interest, incentives, or social pressure. And these realities don't invalidate the log frames, but they show that linear logic works best as a hypothesis to be tested and adapted, not as a fixed script for how change will unfold. Yeah, over to you, Naya. Thank you.
Thank you, Buari, for such a very interesting answer. Actually, we're talking about how the field in our reality can change something else. And now we're moving on into the second questions. So, how would you identify and correct false linearity in log frames designed for complex or adaptive interventions?
So I usually identify false linearity by checking whether the log frame offer simplifies how change actually happen in complex system, and this can be seen from uh, from first this a single vertical cost change, stable pathway from output to outcomes in contexts that involve multiple actors, political negotiation of or behavioral change. You might see that the log frame, this pathway is too linear, is too simple to direct, or you can see any missing link in it. And the second is it's usually output heavy outcomes, where outcomes imply activities like I mentioned earlier, like number of people trained, implying that their capacity automatically improved, which in reality it doesn't mean like that. And you can see risk and assumptions are too generic, too low level. It's not analyzed in detail. It's not, it doesn't have a recommendation on how to deal with the risk, what level of the risk are. And the last is social change is presented as inevitable. So the log frame ignores the context or environment where the change is expected to happen. The context may also change. You know what I mean. So as I mentioned earlier, that the context or environment uh, can be easily changed, yeah, even during the log frame development. And well, the social change in the log frame is presented. Oh, it's too optimistic. It ignores the fact that the context or environment itself is changed. And to correct this, yeah, uh, and I usually do like I reframe the log frame as a set of contribution pathways rather than a single chain. I'm This way I focus on the outcomes and identify the activities that lead to them. So I don't focus on the activity, but I out focus on the outcomes and in fact impact. What what are the big, the big picture, and uh, how to reach that outcome and impact. And I split or group the outcomes into main issues, such as this outcome focus uh, on policy, while the second outcome focused on capacities, and the third outcome focused on behavior, something like that. So activities that is under the outcomes are all related to the outcome. And the second is I make risk and assumptions explicit and monitorable. I remember in the previous organization I worked for, we developed a separate risk table and monitored and updated it regularly because the risks were mostly related to dynamic political issues that could change several times in a quarter. And the last, I paired the log frame with a living theory of change narratives where it is revisited regularly. It is usually discussed annually, during the team meeting or team building, like that. This way, I also allow indicator revisions during implementation. Yeah, thank you, Inaya.
All right. Thank you, Bu Ari. Now, before we jump into the third question, which I believe you are very much relevant with your experience and also your professional judgment. So, in donor funded programs, how have you seen LFA use as a tool of control rather than learning? And what are the implications?
Yeah, I've never experienced a strict LFA used merely as a tool of control. However, yeah, based on my experience, it was used both as a control and a learning tool. On one side, the LFA served as a control or direction for the program on what to achieve, how to do it, when and who will be involved. And from there, we could identify gaps and find ways to improve the program. On the other hand, the logical framework did not stand alone. That's based on my experience. Yeah, it was accompanied and supplemented by the theory of change or other reporting tools that present the complexity or context change that LFA cannot capture, such as most significant change theory and case studies. In addition, there was always room for refining the log frame, be it revising the output, outcome, and impact statements to descriptions, means fair verification and indicators. However, the version of the revised log frame should be clear, agreed upon by the program staff and ultimately the donor. So this way, yeah, we could better explain the deviations or change what has been achieved, what has not, why, what lessons have been learned, what we should do or not do in the future, and how. So yeah, uh, I I'm so sorry. I've never seen that very strict log frame like that. That should be, should be done as is. Over to you, Inaya.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ibu. It's no worry if you have not experienced that, but I think we can get the message that from so many programs or donor-funded programs that we can learn so many uh, what should be learned from each programs or from each projects that you've been working on before. Okay. And now let's move on into the third segment, which we are kindly ask you to share your insights and perhaps recommendations for us. So, what would be your advice to practitioners who are still struggling with log frames?
I would not give advice as I'm still learning, but I would like to give some tips based on my experience. Yeah. Uh, First, understand the context. Be informed and sensitive to the context change. You don't need to be an expert on it. Just you just need to learn or be willing to learn. And second, discuss with as many users and stakeholders of the log frame as possible and ask for their feedback because in the end they are the users. Yeah, they are the users. And as monitoring and evaluation uh, expert, you need to know their perspective. You need to know how they run their program. And in the end, it is the program's log frame, not yours. So don't keep the pain to yourself. Share it with others. And third, seek help from the relevant expert, especially for the specific context that is beyond your expertise. If for example the program is about climate change and you are not familiar with it, don't hesitate to reach out to a climate change expert. Learn from them. What, for example, what adaptation is, what mitigation is, how to measure greenhouse gas emission reduction, for example, after mangrove plantation. Yeah, so don't hesitate to ask, offer to you, Anaya.
All right, that's interesting. Do not hesitate to ask and always be open to learn. I think I agree with that, Ibu Ari, with you. Okay. So before we end this session, do you have a closing statement for our MONEV podcast listeners, or perhaps you would like to appoint something in the futures, perhaps this topic or other anything else?
uh, well, developing a log frame can be intimidating and stressful. Take your time, don't seek perfection. Be creative and adaptive with the log frame itself and in developing supplementing tool. So just don't be too strict with the log frame. It is fine if the log frame is strict, but you can always develop something to fulfill the gap, and it will be better along the way. That's all from me, Inaya.
Okay. Thank you for sharing such a thoughtful and practical insights with us, Ibu Ari. And I think that's already the end of our discussions for today. So I need to remind everyone here again that logical framework is indeed important, and always remember that we are here to learn together. So if you need to seek help or to ask someone or to explore more on your ideas or topics, that's completely welcome. So again, I would like to say thank you very much, Ibu Ari, for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thank you, Inaya.
Thank you, Ibu. And everyone, that's the end of our conversations. Hopefully, our casual chat in this episode can provide knowledge to all of you. And before I end this episode, don't forget to check out the previous episodes to get important and up to date informations and educations about monitoring and evaluations. See you in the next episode.